All right, I'm here to tell you a little bit more detail about something that I'm pretty passionate about. It's this new ledge lineup of rods. It's in the Team Lou's Custom Pro lineup, which is the rod that I absolutely loved when I came on board with Lou's. And then we had talked about building some technique-specific ledge series that I could help them design, and we went right to work. And here's what Lou's didn't do. They didn't say, Mark, we want you to take this rod and we want you to go and sell it and put your name on it and endorse it. We went back and forth for a year to get the actions right on these things. They're very high modulus graphite, LFS, X something or another, nanotechnology. It's not the specific, you know what, I'm not going to try to get into that today. I'll just tell you, they're very high modulus graphite rods. They use tangle-free guides, just the right amount of guide. Everything that I know about rods and my passion about rods has gone into these rods, from the actions, from the reel seat to the grip, to how long they are, how many guides are on them, and all that. So I'll just go through the lineup with you. My first one, I wanted to have 3 crankbait rods. I wanted a small, which a lot of times I'm throwing like anywhere from a Strike King 1.5, 1.0, Series 3, 3XS, like I really love to throw on ledges sometimes when the forage is really small. Like I was just on the Red River here recently. I was throwing this bait some because they had real small shad. So this is the perfect rod. It's 7.6, which gives me a lot of castability, but the action for this rod is, again, very specific to that lineup of crankbaits. I've had a ton of people in the Ozarks talk about how good of a wiggle wart rod it is, and so that size crankbait is perfect for this particular rod. I like going with the 7.5 to 1 gear ratio and in this Hyper Mag, but I use several different crankbait reels for these rods, but right now we're just going to get specific on the rod. We've put a hook keeper on them, again, tangle-free stainless steel guides with zirconium inserts in them, the best guides that money can buy, just the right amount of them. We don't overdo it with guides. That's one thing that I've seen a lot with real rod companies. They put too many guides, which adds to weight on your rod. If you'll notice, this is grade A cork fused right into EVA foam. So it's durable, it doesn't have a lot of weight, and it feels good, which is what I really like about a grip. I want to be able to have a solid reel grip. When I reach back there and grab, I don't want some little Mickey Mouse rod blank right here that I'm grabbing that, you know, it feels funny to me. It's like with a sledgehammer. I don't want to grab something little, hammering a nail, and I don't want it back here with my rod. I want it to be nice and comfortable where I can make a good long cast. And that's where these long crankbait rods come in handy. This one is 7.6. The next lineup that I'm going to tell you is the next rod is a big crankbait. That was small crankbait. This is big crankbait, and this covers that Series 5, 5XD, 6, 6XD, any crankbait that your favorite crankbait out there that you like to throw in those sizes. That's where this rod really comes in handy. Again, it's the smooth. All of my ledge series have this smooth, solid grip, and it's contoured right here. It's not the skeletal type reel seat, and that's what I really like. I don't want to feel any of those hard ridges back here. I like something really smooth. Again, this rod is built just for that lineup or that size of crankbaits. Now this one goes, that was a 7.6. This one goes to a 7.11, which gives you that a little bit extra length for the distance on your cast. Wide open water, you can really get that distance. And so I've got the backbone for the torque and everything on the distance of the cast, but yet I've got just the right bend right here. A lot of people use glass, and you know, I'm not gonna knock them. I think David Fritz is the best crankbait fisherman in the world. He grew up using glass, that's what he's used to. I like graphite, but I realize when a fish freight trains you right here at the boat, you've got to be able to protect your small 12, 10-pound line. So that's where this right here comes in, just the right amount on that last percentage of the rod blank. I've got the tip, but yet I can set the hook with that 6XD with right here, and I can get the distance in my cast. So that is the big crankbait. Now we have a Magnum crankbait, very specific model right here. This is this rod. You can throw a lot more crankbaits with those two than you can this one, but there's never a ledge fishing situation where I don't want an oversized crankbait. 8XD, 10XD, and bigger. Some people throw, there's lots of different crankbaits that are coming out there now that are big. That's where the Magnum crankbait rod is going to come in handy. It's the perfect action right here. It's got just the right backbone to cast this. I mean, guys, this is a 2-point-something ounce bait. It's a heavy bait. You can't throw that bait on a big crankbait rod or a small crankbait rod. So this rod handles it. It loads, as you can see, it just loads real nicely, and you still have that protection. Now, you're not going to throw 12-pound line with this big crankbait, so you don't need quite as much on the tip, but it does give you that protection right there when that fish surges right at the boat, and it doesn't rip the hooks out of the mouth. But you need that backbone, man, for your cast, and to be able to set, look how big of the diameter are on these big hooks that we throw. So you got to be able to set the hook on that crankbait, and that's where that backbone really comes in handy. So it's a technique specific, but you really need this rod for these really big crankbaits. If you're trying to double up with something else, you're probably not going to get the action that you need on it. Now, outside of the crank, we also have a 9-footer for the guys that really like those oversized rods. I don't throw it a whole lot, but I know a lot of people that throw that oversized crankbait rod. We built a 9-footer in the big crankbait just for you, because the 6XD is the kind of the more popular rod. We go from there into a swimbait rod. I can't ledge fish without a paddle tail swimbait anymore, and my favorite rod for this is the new ledge swimbait rod. And again, it's a 7.6, and it's built exactly for 3/4 and 1 ounce swim baits. It's got the right amount of backbone, it loads just right, and I don't want something stiff. I want those fish to load. I want a swim bait rod. I want it to be able to load up, and I want them to be able to suck it in, and me be able to just lean into. You don't short line setting the hook like you do in a bush. You just lean into them, and that's where this rod, it just loads up really nicely. Just as you start to bend it, it starts to load up through and through. And I've played with a swim bait a whole lot. I've played with swim bait rods. This, in my opinion, is the perfect action for that 1/2 to 1 ounce swim bait that we ledge fish with. Now, probably the most versatile rod in my lineup, and a rod that I throw not only on ledges but everywhere. I have it on my deck even if I'm not in all spring and everything, is the jig worm rod. It's a 7.2 heavy. I'm not going to use the terms you know, fast, extra fast, or heavy, medium heavy, all that kind of stuff, because all that it changes. It varies. Different rod companies use different actions, but I will tell you, for a 1/2 ounce to a 1 ounce bait, pitching a football jig, really 1/2, 3/4 is what it's perfect for, but yet it also handles a 1 ounce football jig very nicely. As you can see, this is a 1 ounce jig, and it loads up just really nice, but it's got that good, we did a little video today and you saw where I was setting the hook way out there, and that's what this rod does. It gives you that hook setting ability way out there on a long distance cast right here, but yet it's got a little bit of tip where you can control your cast and all that as well. 7.2, I don't want a rod that's real, a feel rod like this, something that I'm really feeling and counting those ledge rocks. I want it kind of light, and that's where this high modulus graphite, I don't have a broomstick for a length of a handle. I've got something really nice where it's comfortable. Anything outside of just a normal cast, anything extra than that where you'd normally hold your hands, I feel like it's too long. So the 7.2 jig worm rod, if you want a perfect little rod to cast 3/8 or 1/2 ounce jig around bushes or boat docks, it doubles up as a very nice. If I had to have one, that would be the one. Well, I couldn't have one. I'd have to have like 10 of them. But finesse, I didn't leave out the finesse fishing because so many times on ledges, the bite is tough. There's no wind. There's no current. You know the fish are there, but gosh, you can't get them to bite. That's where I go to 8 and 10 pound line, 15 pound braid. I'm not supposed to be showing this reel a whole lot because this thing right here is the bomb. It's special. It's coming out soon. You guys will be seeing it real soon. But this particular rod is 610. It's my ledge spinning rod, all purpose. Man, I love throwing a 3/16 and 1/4 ounce shaky head with a Strike King Perfect Plastic 7-inch finesse worm on there. Plum and green pumpkin are my 2 favorite colors. That is like candy. It's like banana split to a bass. And I love throwing that when everything is really tough. Now, I also really love the Niko Rig. That's where you screw a little, you take like a 8-inch bullworm, you screw a weight on the end of it, 3/32 ounce weight, hook it right in the middle with an O-ring, about a number 1 or a 1/0 hook, and that thing is dynamite on highly pressured bass or those type situations I just explained. So I've got to have a spinning rod in the lineup. I came up with the most versatile one that I know. Yes, you can have 7 foot and 7.2 and 7.6 actions for certain particular stuff you like throwing a spinning rod on. But if you had one shaky head rod, one rod that you can do a little bit of everything with, that's the action I tried to come up with, and I believe that's what I've done. Now, just to fill you in, those are the current models out. This year, here in a month or two, we're coming out with 3 more. We're coming out with a Carolina Rig. Right, you'll start to see the ledge logo, bold red. And we're coming out with a Carolina Rig rod, which is perfect. The perfect length. It's going to be a 7.4 to 7.5. We haven't really finalized that yet, but nonetheless, either one of them is going to be a perfect size for Carolina Rig, those long distances. But we kept the weight really down. We didn't put just a giant long handle on it, but it's got the really good backbone that you need for Carolina rigging, with just a little bit of tip for that 1/2 ounce if you want to throw the 1/2 ounce. But it's perfect for a 3/4, 1 ounce, 1/2 ounce. Hair jig rod, I throw it more and more on ledges now. Caught a ton of fish with it, and I needed a rod just for a hair jig. When Lou said, what's a few actions that you're needing, or what baits do we not have out there, hair jig was one of them. Went right to work. We tried them, well, a couple models, and I believe we got it. This one is 7.2. It's just the perfect action. It's the ledge hair jig rod. This is going to be, I throw a 1/2 ounce to a 3/4 ounce most of the time on a hair jig, with 5/8 probably being my most popular size. That's what I built this rod for. The perfect 1/2 to 3/4 ounce hair jig rod. If you want to go to a 1 ounce, 1.25 ounce, something like that, you could probably double up, use the Magnum crankbait rod or something like that. Maybe even the Carolina Rig rod, jig worm rod might even do it. But for that hair jig that's the most popular out there, 1/2 and 5/8 and 3/4, this hair jig rod is going to be dynamite for it. Perfect action. Last but not least, a spoon. The Strike King Sexy Spoon. I've won a couple of tournaments on it offshore. It's a bait that's a mainstay in my boat. Even some of the bigger spoons out there, I throw those as well. With a spoon, you had to have a very specific technique. And let me just tell you something about a spoon. When you make that long cast out there, as long as you can, and you're letting that thing flutter to the bottom with a complete slack line. Reason why you want a complete slack line? A spoon has action. It's not just a big hunk of lead that gives a lot of flash and the fish comes up and grabs it. That thing, when it's going in the water, when you have a completely slack line, it has an action. It's got a won't, 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 won't. Free sound effects. I don't charge any extra for that. But when you feel, it's kind of like a lipless crankbait or anything else. You feel that good action. When you're not feeling that with a spoon, you're not fishing your spoon properly. You got too much tension on your line, and it's just going through the water like that. These big flutter spoons, that's exactly what you want them to do. You want them to flutter and get that good cradling action. Every time you feel that good cradling action, that's when you know your bites are going to come. It'll just thunk. Now, when he hits it way out there and you feel that tick, man, you've got a ounce plus bait way out there. So you got to be able to pile drive that fish and get that hook in his face. You don't just lean into them like a crankbait or something. You've got to stick that hook in that fish's face, because so many times I hear people tell me, man, I set the hook on a spoon, it was on the end of my cast, and I watched him walk on his tail and he spit my spoon out. It's because you didn't have a good hook set in him. So I've got that good backbone that you need right here on my spoon rod, and I got a 710 rod where I can take up a lot of slack. You couple that with a 7.5 to 1 or an 8.3 to 1 gear ratio hyper mag, and you got the perfect spoon rod. Guys, I put a lot of heart and soul into these rods. I've been successful offshore, and everything I know about ledge fishing has gone into them. I just hope that you enjoy them just half as much as I've enjoyed creating them.